Hello, welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lepki, and this is George. George is a stuffed animal that we've had in our family for about 33 years. It is actually my brother's stuffed animal, but when he left home as a teenager, he was decidedly not sentimental and chose not to bring it with him. So I kept George. The really special thing about George is actually the story about how we got him. I don't know much about the situation or what was going on at the time, but my brother was in the hospital for some reason when he was about 3 years old. And there was a little girl in the hospital who had a stuffed dog that my brother would constantly go and steal from her so that he could play with it because he just loved this stuffed dog. The little girl was in for a much longer stay. I don't know why. I can only really guess as to why. And when it was my brother's time to leave the hospital, she gave him George, the stuffed dog that he just could not leave alone. And it's a really precious memory. So yeah, today what I want to do is create a story that is loosely based on the day that we ended up with George, the stuffed dog. So it's not going to be a true story. It's just going to be loosely based on the situation that was happening at the time. And I wanted to make another 60-second story like the previous one I made called When Mothers Weep, because everyone seemed to really enjoy that one quite a bit, and I want to do more content like that. So today I'm going to show the process of me making a 60-second story and do it with the challenge of telling the story of a stuffed animal.
I always end up plotting my stories first, and it always ends up being a really important aspect of my writing process. Typically, I'm not a very structured person in my life, but when it comes to writing, I find that setting the plot is sort of like making an armature for a clay figure. It just gives you a really solid structure to base all of the creativity on, and it also makes it so that later on I don't have to worry about things getting out of shape and me having to go back later to reshape it into something good. It's always going to have that strong base to build off of, and then I can be as creative as I want on top of that, and it'll take less effort to make it a good story later on. For when I'm writing my 60-second stories, that is especially true because I typically want them to be between 1 and 2 minutes long. I don't want it to have to take a really long time for people to consume these stories. And in order to write a story that is that short, you have to be very precise with your pacing. A person can typically speak 144 words in a minute. I actually speak a lot slower than that, and that's because I have a little bit of a stutter that makes it really difficult for me to talk quickly. So I always end up having to cut things together to make it sound like I'm speaking more quickly than I actually am. But I'm going to go off of the basis of 144 words per minute, which means my total amount of words that I write for the story should be between 144 and 216 words. Now, if you follow any of my content, you know that I love basing everything off of the word count that I want to achieve, and I'm always fairly aware of how many words I want in any particular story that I write. And the reason the word count is important to me is it helps me build out the structure of my story and when certain events take place in it. If we go back to the Dan Harmon method of plotting, then you have these 4 quadrants that you break the story down into with specific middle moments that occur that are different points in the hero's journey timeline. and each aspect of the story has to occur at these very specific moments in time. You'll know that each quadrant has to have a certain number of words to fulfill that aspect of the story. So in this case, it's about 27 words that goes into each particular section. So now that I know how long each section needs to be, it gives me a better idea of how I'm able to tell the story. So that brings me to plotting the story itself. So what I want to happen is the story of a little girl she's in a hospital. And then I'll also want a young boy, which I'm just going to put a diaper on him because he's basically a toddler. And then there's the stuffed dog. I think at the beginning of this story, I am going to have the little boy have already stolen the dog to sort of set up that this is something that's frequently happened. The little girl is going to be asking about the dog, and at the time, I think her parents aren't going to be really concerned about that, because they're probably going to be talking to the doctor about her condition. So her major concern is going to be the dog, which is missing because it's with the little boy. And during the story, I'll probably have the parents and the doctor talking back and forth about the girl's condition, letting them know that it's terminal, that they don't really have much hope for her. So of course they're going to be very sad. Now what I want to do is to take the story to where the girl's concern for the dog that was taken by the little boy sort of becomes a symbol of her growing up and growing beyond the stuffed animal. Her attention is going to be directed throughout the story from the childhood desire for her favorite stuffed animal to the realization of her own mortality, which is a very adult thing to understand. And it's going to be the realization of her own mortality that helps her understand that there are things that are more important than her getting to keep her favorite stuffed animal, and allows her to perform an act of kindness to the little boy by giving him the dog, because she knows that she's not going to be around forever to keep the dog, but the little boy can keep it for her, and it'll work as a way of like transferring her innocence to somebody who is allowed to maintain their innocence for longer than she was. So with that basic idea, I need to add that onto my plot structure. Because the story is so short, it actually needs to happen in a very quick amount of time, because I can't send the girl on a long adventure in order to achieve her goal of growing up. So it has to be something that happens really quickly with very concise storytelling. So my idea is that this entire story happens within the span of several minutes. So now that I have the basis of my story complete, I am going to pull up Google Docs and try to pin it out real quick. So this is probably my favorite part. It's time to actually edit everything down. I have it at about 544 words now, which is easily twice the amount that I wanted it to be. So I'm gonna have to go through and try to make things more concise and try to do it without taking too much of the structure out of the story. So I was able to edit it down to where the story was more along the lines of about 2.5 minutes to read, which I was pretty excited about. It's still a really nice short snippet of a story, which is exactly what I was going for. I think it gets across this nice idea that death isn't necessarily you losing someone, it's you giving them over to be loved for longer by God. For me personally, as a Christian, that's a really comforting notion, and it helps to ease the burden of suffering that you feel when you lose someone. And I hope that that's the way other people feel about this as well. I'm going to take some time to make a video to fit around this. It may be something as simple as taking pictures of the toy that I based it off of, or I might do like a shadow puppet kind of animation. I'm not sure which one. It'll depend on how much time it takes me. But either way, I will post the finalized story next week for your enjoyment.
Thank you for watching CC Writes. I hope you enjoyed your time with me today. If you'd like more content from me, then you can find my books on Amazon.com. You can also support me by making a donation to the CC Writes Patreon page. For more everyday content from me about my life, my thoughts on writing, and my dog, you can follow me on Twitter at CC Writes. There are links in the description below. And finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification button so you'll know when the next episode comes out. Till next time, see you later.